got somebody. All right, so Netanel, how about you introduce yourself? First of all, show us what you're wearing tonight.
I have my lovely PreservUs shirt.
Okay. Oh,
very nice.
Here we go. We have our guests. Jonathan and Gabe. Gabe, you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Jonathan, we can hear you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being so prompt. And to start things off, my name is Sohn. I'm the co-founder of PreservUs, a Cemeteries company. And over here on my left, we have Netanel Crispe. Netanel Crispe is a Vermonter, and he and I are working together on a cemetery restoration and digitization project up in Vermont this coming spring. So to all of our watchers over here, I see people coming in on Facebook. We have Jesse, we got Shai Knecht, we got Daniela. Awesome having so many people joining us tonight. But last week, Gabe reached out saying how he saw the fundraiser we're doing, the GoFundMe for this Vermont project, and asked if his father, Jonathan, could share some of their family history about the Jewish connection over in Vermont. So with that, I'm going to hand things off to Netanel, the other Vermonter in this group. And then after Netanel gives a little brief background about himself, Jonathan, the floor is yours. And we'll get started. So Netanel.
Yeah, so my name is Netanel Crispe. I'm 18 years old and currently a senior in high school. And I am a 10th generation Vermonter and a Hasidic Jew. And this past summer, I basically started this project to preserve and fully restore Vermont's oldest Jewish cemetery in East Pulteney, Vermont. And basically from that point on, I've been fortunate enough to partner with PreservUs and Ari, and we're hoping to get on site beginning this spring and get this work done. It's a multi-phase project with a lot involved, everything from the restoration of the stones to digitization and most importantly, of course, actually writing down, documenting, and preserving the story and history of those interred there or buried there, as well as the history of the Jewish community of East Pulteney, the first Jewish community in Vermont. So I'm very thankful and happy to be here tonight to hear part of that story.
Okay. Well, sure, Jonathan. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I can't believe that you're like a 10th generation Jewish person living in Vermont. How far back does that go to?
So my father's actually a convert, so that's why the Jewish line doesn't go all the way back.
That's why you got 10 generations.
Exactly.
Because otherwise you wouldn't have that. Huh.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry, where do you live in Vermont?
I live in Danby, about 20 minutes south. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, how do you survive up there? That's why I mean, I'll tell you a little bit of my story, but I didn't think I could survive as a Jewish person up there. Not an observant person. Yeah.
It's definitely a unique experience, but there's a lot of good that comes from it, and I've enjoyed it to the fullest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll tell you my story. I mean, I don't know if it's much of a story, but my parents bought this house in Pulteney, Vermont in 1974, I think, 73 or 74. And we had no idea what was up there. It was an old brick house on Route 30. And I moved there. I moved to Vermont in 79. And I moved with my wife at that point, and we got divorced, but then I moved to the house in Pulteney. And became a resident of Pulteney. I fixed up the house. I played tennis with the, Presbyterian minister, and he said, "Oh, you're Jewish? Well, like you should be you're the only Jewish person I know in town. Why don't you join they have a clergy group that would meet once a month. So they had me come as the token Jew there. They wanted me to speak about Passover. At that point, I wasn't observant. I didn't know anything about anything. And but I knew that in Poultney, I knew about the cemetery, and I knew and the town historian had come to my house, and I had met him, and also he showed, and I told him we're Jewish, and I told him about that, and he said, well, this is the house in East Poultney. He pointed out the house in East Poultney that was used as the synagogue at that point. And so that's what I knew about it. But for me, it was like it was like a place, it was like a launching pad for me to become Jewish, because I felt so isolated. I mean, I had connections in Rutland at the Rutland Jewish Center there, and I knew Rabbi Goldberg. He was probably before your time. But he told me about the cemetery and their relationship to East Poultney. But for me, it was, I mean, the personal trip was, I went into that little Poultney library and I read everything I could about Judaism, and it wasn't very in depth, and there wasn't much information. It was, books about, written by Saul Bellows and anything I could find. But so I wound up taking I'm a psychotherapist, so I was working in Middlebury, which had somewhat of a Jewish community. In fact, we used to have Passover Seders with Ben and Jerry's, because those guys lived in Vermont, and I was good friends with the person who they had worked with at a school, and when the school broke up, they became Ben and Jerry's and the ice cream place. Wow. So we'd have all this nice kosher, we'd have all this, Passover food, and then we'd have ice cream at the end. So it wasn't very. I mean, the spirit was there, but the rules. But I wound up going to traveling around the world, and I went to Israel, and I had a friend who had become Orthodox, and I found his connections. I wound up going to Or Sameach, and from there I've maintained my Orthodoxy and raised my family that way, paid for yeshivas and my kids. But I knew that I couldn't stay in Vermont. I as much as I loved it, I was in grief for probably 2 or 3 years, because I just couldn't live there, and it became a house that we'd go up to. But it was rough, because and there was a lot of anti-Semitism up there. It wasn't like such. I mean, you probably found that. I mean, people are just stupid the way they view Jewish people. Like I had comments like happy as a Jew in the junkyard, and just statements that they couldn't believe that we were Jewish, and it was just an ignorant population not understanding. But I've always had an interest in that house and in the community, and what happened to that community. Where did these people go? Did they just evaporate? Did they go west, young man? I mean, is that what happened? What happened to these families? Or did some of them move to Rutland, and did they form a community there? And I don't know if there was. I know in Burlington there was an Orthodox synagogue up there. I don't know if you've ever been there, but again, maybe way after what was happening in East Poultney. There was an Orthodox community up in Burlington, and I've been to that shul. I mean, they had a men and women's section there. I think the doors were shut, but now they have Chabad up there.
Yep.
And that was my other connection. Like, I had one of my sons. My son from my first marriage wound up going to the University of Vermont, so we got to know the Chabad people up there. But in regards to the cemetery and the Jewish community, I'm very interested about what happened to them. And, I don't know what kind of help I could be other than, throwing you guys some money, maybe to help you with but
thank you for saying that, not the money part.
You meant that part. That's okay.
No. Part of the reasons why we're so happy to have you on here is because for a lot of the people that follow my company and the friends of mine, Vermont is this obscure place somewhere north of New York, and afterthought. And adding on top of that cemeteries, which is an afterthought, that's something that Netanel started doing on his own with his personal venture to restore the cemetery in East Poultney. And that's something that resonates with me as someone who has a cemetery digitization business, as someone who has restored over 15,000 graves across Vermont, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Israel. So having you on here as someone who can be that spokesperson, like Jews do exist here, we did exist here, Jewish history is something that we really value. And your story is integral to our project because a lot of the work that we're going to be doing is for people of the past. Netanel mentioned how over the summer and the fall, before we connected, Netanel and I only connected back in December. But once Netanel started the project, he saw a burial from 2018 as the most recent one, but then our burial is 100 years old. And there really are people that can be the voices for this community. And whether or not you or your father or Gabe are active members in this community, that community lives on with you. And your story is part of that. And part of restoring and preserving cemeteries is making that story available for the masses, which is why we brought you on here. We're live. I've had a bunch of people already check in to hear your story, but you being here really means a lot. So I know Gabe mentioned that about your father, Jonathan, who fought in World War II. So if there's anything you'd like to expound about, you spoke about you personally, but anything else, other history that you might know of that would be willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, my story is probably the story of, about more of a Baal Tshuva kind of story, how my father fought in World War II. He was from Portchester, New York. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge. But I grew up on stories about anti-Semitism from him about the army and, how, one guy had just, in their, where they were all sleeping, says, "I'm glad there's no Jews here." And my father jumped up and, they got into a physical fight and they fought until my father couldn't even pick his head up. And this guy picks my father up and says, "If anybody says anything bad about the Jews, they're going to talk to me." So, it's like that, I grew up feeling like, being a Jewish person was very important. But I didn't know why. Like it's one thing to feel defensive about your ethnicity, but you have to have some investment in that and understand why it is important to be Jewish and why to save this cemetery, because it's family. These people, I don't know who these people are, but I imagine it's like mishpacha. It's family, and they're buried there, and they need to have what respect for that, and the people who come there, because I know that cemetery is near a non-Jewish cemetery. So what about people that wander in from the non-Jews, and they see this place that's a derelict and a mess? They're probably thinking like the Jews are gone. I remember playing tennis with this guy, the minister, and he was very serious about these. He says, you've been the chosen people. We're going to be afterwards, when you guys all convert or die out, we're going to be the chosen people. And I thought, and that was before I became observant. And I would love to meet him again, because I could tell him that that's not true. That I know for certain that's not true.
Well, I think for better or for worse, anti-Semitism is actually the only reason all of us are talking right now. Likely.
Well, that's where they take it out. They take it out in the cemeteries.
It's one of the places, yeah. And the actual, just to give some history about my company, I started PreservUs in March of 2019. And I had this idea, just to give some background, I used to live in South America in Colombia. I was a director of ACC. And when I came back, I was unemployed in between things, and I started photographing and mapping cemetery for my uncle up in Albany, New York. And then I started coming across a lot of fallen over and dirty headstones. So I started cleaning them up in my free time, and I didn't tell a soul. I just felt like it was the right thing to do. But one day, it was October of 2018, I was cleaning up. It was actually the last day of this was this digitization project. It was about 5,000 graves in total that I did. I was wearing my kippah in the cemetery, and some guy comes driving by in a pickup truck and shouts, "You effing Jew," and drives off.
Right.
I've experienced like pretty minor anti-Semitism, just like comments, like walking around, but that's something that I've accepted when I do wear my kippah.
Yeah, right.
But and this actually, that happened to be the same week as the Pittsburgh shooting.
Oh gosh.
And
That's
I really
tough.
wanted to keep, yeah, it was really horrible. And I thought, well, there's two things I could do. I actually kind of felt like I would be selfish if I shared my good deeds, my mitzvah of cleaning up these headstones. But I realized, you know what, maybe if I publicize what I'm doing, this could inspire other good deeds and bring some good
Right.
into the world. And that's where
Right.
I recorded myself cleaning up a grave because of this anti-Semitic guy who thought that he was going to maybe end what I'm doing, but it inspired me to continue what I was doing. And then from there, that's when I really got the motivation to start a business. And the business became an idea, but from that one video that I posted 3 days later, I got a Facebook message just like Gabe saying, "Hi, I saw something you shared. I saw the video you shared. I'm from Manchester, England. Here are some headstones from my community cemetery with swastikas on them. Is there something you can do to help me?" That gentleman is Johnny. He's the co-founder. So yes, anti-Semitism stings, but one thing that has always proven time after time is that it's not going to stop us. And it's this concept and this willingness to preserve our history from generation to generation that is some of our core values. And we're not a Jewish company. I mean, I happen to be Jewish. My partner happens to be Jewish, but we preserve all types of graves. I've gone to Chinese cemeteries, Hindu cemeteries, Catholic, Presbyterian. But this concept of preserving and sharing and protecting our past is what I think will help build stronger generations to come. So your story really your grandfather's stories in the military and your stories as well really resonates with, and that's something that I really value.
Yeah, and just kind of adding on to that, I have to say, kind of tying my experience into yours and how they kind of compare is my father, as I said, I'm a 10th generation Vermonter on his side. He grew up in Brattleboro, and I was actually born in Jerusalem. I've lived all over the country, and then 6 years ago, my family came back to Vermont as a Hasidic Jewish family. Very odd. We now live, as you know, in Danby. It's kind of the middle of nowhere. And it's,
do you guys dress as Hasidic Jews? Do you walk around?
Yeah, I go to public school. I wear a yarmulke and tzitzis every day.
You're a gutsy guy.
Netanel is actually part of like one of the leading members of the Vermont Metal Detecting Club. Actually, one of his rich desire for history got started, I believe. Correct?
Yeah, so I'm a trustee of my local historical society, and I metal detect on behalf of a bunch of museums and historical societies around the state. And that's been one of my ways to kind of learn about history and preserve it, which has led me to doing a project like this. But being a religious Jew, I lived here for 6 years. I'd known Pulteney pretty well, but I had no idea that there was any kind of Jewish history there until this summer when I was metal detecting. I was similarly introduced to the history of the town and the cemetery. And I too was really disappointed to see how this historic site had been kind of forgotten, abandoned, and just completely neglected over the years, and basically took it upon myself to start this initiative to do something about that. And in that process, I've just been one of the most rewarding aspects of this project has been to meet people like yourself, hear your stories, and understand that there are other Jews in the state. There are other people who have faced similar obstacles in their lives and in surviving the harsh winters of Vermont and everything that comes with that lifestyle. And to know that during the mid to late 1800s, during some of the worst kind of persecution and kind of developments in the world and in America, we had a Jewish community, a bunch of settlers from Europe who came to a no-name place in Vermont and created this community and created something that has survived to this day. With, as you said, the home that was owned and used as the first shul in Vermont, the first synagogue, as well as the cemetery, and hearing stories such as yours, and having been able to meet all these other people and find that there are other Jews till this day, very few, but there are a couple even in Pulteney, including the president of the historical society there, who also have this feeling like something has to be done, and who have been kind enough to aid us in that effort. So
who is the president? Because who is the guy? Remember?
It's Mrs. Smith, Ina Smith. The previous president of the historical society, I believe, is the gentleman you're talking about. He was the president for like 30 years.
Yeah, he was a character, that guy.
That's what I've been told. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him.
Yeah, big bruiser of a guy and stuff. But he just had this room with, people would just give him relics and all this stuff, and this historical society was filled with all these tchotchkes from, all these dead, goyim, and so. But he understood about the importance of the Jewish population there. I mean, he took that into context. I appreciated that about him.
Yeah, and it's really amazing to see that now. I think things have definitely changed, and I know the Historical Society is actually helping us in this effort, and they want to play a larger role in making sure that not only the cemetery is saved, but also the history and legacy of these people is preserved and properly respected and appreciated, because they were pioneers who did some incredible things.
Yeah, Netanel and Ari, just had a question. Are you familiar with that manuscript that they recovered in isn't this used bookstore in Colorado?
Yes,
some
the Pulteney Pin class.
Yeah, so that was how I, like last year, I think it was, I guess sometime, I do a lot of time on maps and just local Jewish history, and just from my dad, I think I've inherited that, as well as a special interest in the Vermont Jewish community. So I came across that. I'm like, this is absolute gold. Went through it. It was immense detail. Documenting even names, ages of people that were there, the first recorded services. So I think a document like that it's really kind of like Beshert in some ways, that was discovered. It got into the right hands. It wasn't trashed, and I think in a lot of ways that gives some. In addition to your project, the PreservUs, I think, teaming up with an actual, historical document can give, a lot of credibility and, I think a lot of inspiration that, we are in a lot of ways a religion of the present and future, but in a lot of ways, Judaism is a religion of the past, not in terms that we're dumb, but, we really do connect up with our ancestors. I mean, I know for one, like, the death ceremony is very sanctified. I know, at least in my family, Shiva calls, even for people we know through third hand, I know for sure my parents were there. Even if it's like a snowy night, they would show up. So, in a lot of ways, I'm really inspired by this work, and it's kind of wild that this was in a town that, my father lived in. I know my grandfather lived in, who my son is named after, and I feel especially connected to this region. I mean, to me, Vermont kind of seems like the Jewish Safad in some ways. I don't know if I'm weird to say that, but it's not so like straight edge in terms of what we see here in Long Island, Westchester, New Jersey. But I think there's there's a lot of spirit there, comes with like the hard winters, and, Netanel, I think I give you a lot of credit for, being proud of who you are. It's not the easiest thing, and especially in your circumstances. So, that being said, I'm just, glad I could connect everyone up, and, just, it's to me, it's, I think, I expect good things from all your work together. So
thank you so much. And if I can real quick, Ari, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. All right. So I just want to kind of bring up with the Pinchas, and I think the lesson from that one, I've been fortunate enough to speak with Professor Shine at Middlebury, who's the head of Jewish studies there, who actually wrote that kind of, he translated the Pinchas and everything with that, and wrote a short little book on it. But one of the most incredible things is, if that document didn't survive and hadn't been purchased by that person in Colorado and hadn't been given to the right people or showed up in the right hands, there would be no record supporting any of this history. And that's the oldest document of any recorded kind of Jewish life in the state of Vermont. So without it, it just is a reminder that everything that we come across, it's also, we have to acknowledge and recognize that there's an importance with the things of the past, and not to take them for granted, not to throw them aside, and that we must preserve all these little things, because how they may affect the future, we really can never know. So that's kind of my take.
No, you're right about it. It's also beshert that this happened. I mean, it's unbelievable that
it's amazing.
Definitely is.
It's like finding the scrolls up in the mountains in Israel, you know. Lost.
Yeah,
The Aleppo Codex now.
With instances like this, you know, I feel like it's too perfect for it to be coincidence, and all of us have to find each other for a common goal and for something that is dear to us. I shared this in other live streams we've done, but I found Netanel because a friend of mine from Yeshiva's wife saw the very first article that got published about Netanel's project in December, and then I messaged him on commented on Facebook, but like his mom replied for me, and then I got his number, and then Gabe found out about this, and I just want to make 2 points. Two questions. So first of all, Gabe, I'd love to hear how you found the GoFundMe. Then after that, we're going to go for about another 4 or 5 minutes. So I want to hear Gabe's story about he was able to find us. And then to finish things off, Jonathan, I would love to hear some parting words about why this project is so meaningful to you. So Gabe, I'd love to hear about you.
Yeah, so I work 120 weeks medical resident. I have a son, so I'm working close to, however, 7 times 24, whatever that is. I'm working around the clock. So whenever we have a minute, I like looking on maps. I like Googling things that, are just interesting to me and things that I feel like I can learn from. So I Googled just the other day, like Pulteney, Vermont, Jewish Cemetery, because I know my dad had mentioned it. And this on Google, like one of the first pages that comes up, it says like 17, 18-year-old guys started a GoFundMe page. I'm like, holy God. And it was kind of recent too. So, that was really how I found out about it, and just kept reading. I showed my wife, she was really fascinated too. And then called my dad immediately and said, hey, this is something I think pretty fascinating. So.
And how'd you find me?
I think it connected to a Facebook page, and then it said PreservUs, and I just looked at some pictures of cleaning up cemeteries, and I'm like, this is like, like you said, it's a mitzvah, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it's really honoring people that are no longer with us, and you're not getting any credit for it. And those are like the hardest deeds to do, because no one can thank you. But just know, at least I'm thankful. My dad's thankful. I'm sure a lot of other people are thankful too.
I appreciate that, Gabe.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
Yeah. Parting words. I mean, I'm thinking it's funny that you're catching me at this point, because I put this house on the market, and it only because my wife can't stand that I'm continue to pay taxes on a place that's nothing's happening, but I want something to happen there. And the other part is that place, my parents were socialist, communist, Jewish people that, just believed in the goodness of whatever could happen from those, political kind of viewpoints, rather than the bad name that people get on those. But they decided that they didn't want to be buried, and they wanted to be cremated. So their ashes are on my property there. And I'm thinking that I have to, this place has been so hard for me to let go of. It's just, there's something there. And for me, I guess I have to find out what that is. And maybe this is part of it, is your project and what we're doing here, and to make it more important than a piece of land that's going to be sold or maybe not sold. So there's unfinished business for me.
That's awesome.
I think that's a big theme in Netanel's work, and definitely my work with PreservUs, that there's a lot of unfinished business with the amount of neglect and with the amount that's been forgotten over the years. It takes people like Netanel and I to meet up, and all the people, all the volunteers that have come work with me, and the other people that are so inspired by doing the cemetery work to write, I wouldn't call it an intentional wrong, but a wrong by circumstance. And I think that having the support of people like yourselves, Jonathan and Gabe, and having you guys as advocates really give me the inspiration, give Netanel the inspiration that that we need to move forward with this project, and it really does mean a lot.
Mm.
So on that note, I'm going to be heading up from New Jersey to Vermont this April to get started, and hopefully this project will go beyond just we've had a few dozen people check in on the live stream, but we've already gone worldwide in terms of the publicity of it, but hopefully this movement of caring about our past and preserving and protecting it is going to become the new norm. So, gentlemen, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to being in touch with you all.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Do you have everybody's contact? I know Gabe.
Yes, well, I have Gabe's information, and
And then get to me.
Netanel and I talk almost every other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would be more than happy. I would love to speak to you further and also hopefully answer some of your questions about where the Jews of Poultney went and what happened to the community. It would be my pleasure.
I would like to know that. They're probably my next door neighbors and they don't know it. They don't know.
You never know.
You never know. You never know.
All right, gentlemen, Netanel and Jonathan, I'll make sure I get all of our contact information shared, and I'm
Okay.
Shavua Tov, and I'm looking forward to getting in touch with you.
Best part of my
Thank you
week.
so much.
Fantastic. Blew my
Hey,
mind.
guys.
Gabe, thank you for making this happen.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, good stuff. All right.
All right,
Gabe,
everybody.
Have a good night,
Gabe,
everyone.
why don't you stay
Bye-bye.
on? Gabe, stay
What'd
on.
you say? Stay on.
Gabe, stay on. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.